This story is titled, "When I Caught My Wife with Another Man, She Threatened to Leave Me Again. But instead of begging, I said okay, handed her the ring, and now she's the one pleading while our roles have completely reversed." Hey Reddit, my name is Dylan, and I'm 29 years old. I've been living in Miami for the past few years, and I've never once regretted making that move. There's something about the eternal sunshine and beaches everywhere that just fits perfectly with my lifestyle. It's exactly the kind of place where I can thrive. I work as a marketing coordinator for a decent company, and I make good money that allows me to live in a nice area. I drive a decent car without having to sacrifice any of the pleasures I enjoy in life. From the outside looking in, my life probably seems pretty solid and well put together. I've been married to Jessica for 5 years now. I used to think we had something real, something meaningful that would last. Boy, was I fucking wrong about that. It was a Tuesday afternoon at exactly 3:45 p.m. when everything started to unravel. I had just finished locking the front door behind me when my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jessica, my beloved wife, and what she wrote would be the beginning of the end. "Running late, don't wait up. Brittany's drama again." That's exactly what the message said. No punctuation, no warmth in her words, just something cold, casual, and rehearsed. It felt like she had typed it without any real thought or emotion behind it. But here's the thing about Brittany's drama. That girl hadn't called Jessica for anything urgent in ages. Ever since Brittany got married and moved to Nevada, their communication had become sporadic at best. Even if she had called with some emergency, I knew Jessica well enough to know her patterns. She loved chaos, but only when she could control it. Brittany's brand of chaos usually drained Jessica rather than energized her. I slid my phone into my pocket more out of habit than belief. It was just routine at this point, but something felt off. I headed to my car and sat there for a full minute before turning the ignition. Something was prickling beneath my skin. Not quite a thought yet, but more like the absence of peace. It was an unsettling feeling that I couldn't quite shake. I decided to drive over to my cousin's place since he was working on some motorcycle project. I pretended to care about the engine work he was doing, but the whole time I found myself checking my phone obsessively. There were no updates, no calls, no surprise photos with a wine glass in hand, and no sister time captions written in that cursive font over some filtered Instagram nonsense that Jessica usually posted during her girls' nights. By 6:30 p.m., I found myself making a decision that I didn't even realize I'd been circling around all day. I got back in my car and drove home, not really knowing what I expected to find. When I pulled into our driveway, Jessica's car wasn't there, but someone else's was parked in its usual spot. It was him, Brandon. That smug bastard with his stained gym shirts and that stupid fucking grin that always made my skin crawl. The first time I had met him, Jessica had casually introduced him as just a friend from college. I didn't question it at the time because why would I? He claimed he was engaged then, or at least that's what he said. That was before I started noticing his comments on Jessica's Instagram posts, before those LOL you're too much replies that never quite sat right with me. Even then, I had convinced myself it was all harmless flirtation. What a fucking idiot I was to think that way. The front door was unlocked when I tried the handle. I walked inside, and silence hit me like a physical wall. It was too heavy, too loaded with unspoken tension. There were no TV sounds, no music playing in the background, and none of Jessica's usual off-key singing to early 2000s R&B while she poured herself wine like she used to do on weeknight evenings. Just that loaded stillness that comes right before a storm hits, or right after a secret gets completely shattered. Then I heard it. A laugh. Her laugh, specifically. It floated down the hallway like a knife wrapped in silk, cutting through the silence with surgical precision. I moved without really thinking, like I had left my body somewhere behind me and was operating on pure instinct. I walked past the kitchen, past all our family photos hanging on the walls, down the hallway toward a door that should have been closed. But it wasn't closed. It was open, not wide, just enough for me to see everything I needed to see. And there she was, sitting on the edge of the couch in our guest room, the one we never fucking used for anything. Her legs were crossed casually, a drink in her hand, looking completely relaxed and at ease. Brandon was positioned on the armrest right beside her, close enough to smell her shampoo, close enough to touch her whenever he wanted to. She looked up first when she noticed me standing there. Shock flashed across her face for just a brief moment, followed by the briefest flicker of annoyance. Like I was interrupting something important, like I was somehow the problem in this situation. Didn't speak, couldn't find any words, so I just stood there staring at the scene in front of me. She blinked slowly, taking her time before speaking. "You're home early," she said, her voice completely flat and matter-of-fact, as if she was commenting on the weather. Brandon stood up suddenly, very aware of where his hands were now and where they had been just seconds before. Jessica didn't move, though. She just continued watching me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It wasn't guilt, and it wasn't fear. It was cold calculation, like she was running numbers in her head, trying to figure out her next move. I said nothing in response to her flat observation. Instead, I just reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding band. I walked across the room slowly, deliberately, and set it down on the edge of the bookshelf, the same one we had bought together at IKEA after spending way too long arguing about whether the black or walnut finish was more timeless. Jessica opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, maybe to explain or defend herself. But I was already turning around and walking away, and she let me go. There was no apology, no desperate chase after me, no pleading or scrambling to fix what had just been broken. Just the quiet click of ice cubes in her glass as she raised it to her lips, continuing to drink like nothing significant had just happened. I didn't look back, and honestly, I don't think she expected me to. The hardest part about that moment wasn't what I actually saw, it was what I didn't see. There was no shock on her face, no scrambling to explain the situation, no frantic attempt to cover her tracks or make excuses. Jessica just sat there with Brandon beside her as if I had walked into some scheduled meeting that she had simply forgotten to cancel. She didn't even shift her legs or adjust her position. She just stared at me like she was watching me fall apart through museum glass, completely detached from the destruction happening right in front of her. I got back in my car without saying another word to either of them. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't have any dramatic breakdown. I just gripped the steering wheel until the leather groaned beneath my palms, trying to process what had just happened. I started driving without knowing where I was going, just needing to be anywhere but there. The first place that came to mind was the cafe on Ocean Drive, the same one we used to visit after late movies during happier times. It's funny how betrayal makes familiar places feel completely foreign, like you're seeing them through someone else's eyes. I sat in a booth by the window and ordered coffee, then just stared at the steam curling upward like smoke from a house that had already burned down. My phone buzzed, and there it was, the first message from Jessica. "Please come home so we can talk," it read. Then came another one almost immediately. "You're overreacting." Then there was a voice message that followed. I didn't listen to it, just watched the little icon pulse on my screen and thought about how many lies you could probably fit into 60 seconds if you really tried. I kept thinking about how she didn't get up from that couch. Not once did she try to stop me from leaving. Not once did she follow me or make any attempt to explain herself. She just sat there like a statue with her drink and her betrayal, completely unmoved by the fact that her husband had just walked out of their marriage. I stayed at that cafe until the lights started dimming and the waitress began wiping down tables, clearly wanting me gone. I couldn't blame her, really. I probably looked like hell. Eventually, I booked a room at a cheap motel nearby, the kind of place with paper-thin walls and buzzing neon signs that makes you feel like you're trapped in some depressing indie film about broken people. I lay on that stiff motel mattress for hours, staring at the ceiling and remembering every touch, every laugh, every night we had fallen asleep, tangled up together in what I thought was genuine intimacy. Now, she was probably still sitting there sipping wine with Brandon, maybe even laughing about how dramatic I had looked, standing there like some outdated statue of loyalty, like some pathetic relic from better times when people actually meant their wedding vows. Morning came and with it a strange kind of clarity. I drove back to the house, not to talk things through or to have some big confrontation, but simply to finish what had started the day before. She was waiting for me on the porch when I arrived, her hair tied up in a messy bun, arms folded tightly across her chest. There was no makeup on her face, which was unusual for her. This wasn't the Jessica I had known for 5 years, the one who always had her armor perfectly applied before facing any difficult situation. I stepped out of my car, and she took a deep breath before speaking. "I messed up," she said, as if that simple admission could somehow fix everything that had been destroyed. "No kidding," I replied, my voice flat and emotionless. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she continued, then delivered the line I had been expecting. It just happened. There it was. The magic phrase, the great excuse of weak people everywhere who refuse to take responsibility for their deliberate choices. "It didn't just happen," I said, looking directly at her. You opened the door, you invited it in, and you smiled while it took my place in our marriage. Jessica's voice got quieter then, almost dropping to a whisper. I was lonely, she replied, as if that somehow justified everything. 100 different replies flooded my head at once, but none of them mattered anymore. I didn't need to win this argument or prove that I was right. I just needed to be done with it, completely and permanently. I trusted you, I said, my voice as flat as concrete. That used to mean something important. She stepped closer to me like physical proximity could somehow fix what she had broken beyond repair. Can we just start over? She asked desperately. We can figure this out together. No, I said simply, and she flinched like I had physically slapped her across the face. You expected me to crawl, I continued, my voice steady and sure. To fight for scraps, to beg you to choose me over him. I'm not doing any of that. I gave you everything I had, and you gave it away for nothing. That's when she started crying, finally showing some real emotion after all the calculated responses. But it was too late for tears now. Her tears were nothing more than receipts for a sale that had already been made, proof of a transaction that couldn't be undone. I walked past her without another word and packed a single bag with just the essentials. I left behind the photos, left behind all the furniture we had picked out together, left behind the entire echo of what we used to be. I didn't look back at any of it. Didn't let nostalgia trap me in a place that no longer felt like home. She called out once as I was loading my car. Not my name, just wait. But I was already gone, already moving towards something else. Something better than the wreckage she had created. The strange thing about life is how quickly the world just goes on around you. Like the earth doesn't give a damn that your entire existence just imploded in spectacular fashion. I still got junk mail delivered to my mailbox. The barista at my usual coffee shop still spelled my name wrong on my cup, and people continued posting photos of their dogs on social media with captions like, "My whole world." All of it felt disgusting and fake now. Or maybe I just wasn't really living in that world anymore. 3 days after I left Jessica, she showed up at my motel room door. I had barely been sleeping during those nights. You know the kind where your eyes are closed, but your brain is just busy building scenes and scenarios you didn't get to witness. What did she say to Brandon after I walked out? Did they make jokes about me and my reaction? Did they laugh at the way I had set my wedding ring down so gently, like I was trying not to wake the dead? When I opened the door, she looked smaller somehow. There was no makeup on her face again, just a hoodie and unwashed hair that made her seem almost vulnerable. For one brief second, I thought maybe she was there to tell me everything, to completely break down and finally tell me the whole truth about what had been going on. But of course, Jessica had other plans entirely. "Can we talk?" she asked, and I stepped aside to let her walk in. She moved past me like the space was still somehow hers, then looked around at the cracked lamp and faded carpet with that same expression she used to make when I burned toast. Like being near decay made her physically uncomfortable and itchy. "You've made your point," she said, settling herself on the edge of the bed like she was conducting a business meeting. "You're hurt. I get it completely." I didn't say anything in response, just watched her carefully to see where this was heading. She sighed dramatically like I was being unreasonably difficult. But walking out like that, not answering any of my calls, that's not how grown-ups handle these kinds of situations. That's when I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The sound just burst out of me before I could stop it. "Cheating on your husband in your own house is how grown-ups handle things?" I asked her. She actually rolled her eyes at me, rolling her fucking eyes like I was being ridiculous. "It was a mistake," she snapped back defensively. "And now you're punishing me for it like I'm some kind of child who broke something." The word punishing hit me like a revelation. That was the exact moment I knew with absolute certainty that she wasn't actually sorry. Not really. She wasn't sorry for what she had done to our marriage or how she had betrayed my trust. She was only sorry about the consequences she was facing now. Her apology wasn't grief over what she had destroyed. It was pure damage control, plain and simple. "I didn't ask you to come here," I told her flatly. "I'm your wife," she replied, as if that title still meant something after what she had done. "Were," I corrected her. "You were my wife." That single word hit her differently than anything else I had said, not like a slap across the face, but more like ice water poured down the back of her spine. She blinked hard, trying to process what I had just said. "So, you're really just throwing away 5 years of marriage like it means nothing?" I stared at her for a long moment, really looking at the woman who once danced barefoot in our kitchen to sad songs playing from her phone. The same woman who had cried in my arms when her dad got sick and needed surgery. That woman was completely gone now, and maybe she had been gone for much longer than I had realized or wanted to admit to myself. "You threw it away," I said finally, my voice steady and sure. "I just noticed what you had already done." She stood up from the bed, and I could see it building in her eyes. She wanted to yell, to scream at me, to somehow make this entire situation about my reaction instead of her betrayal. But she didn't let it out. Instead, she turned and walked toward the door, pausing just before she reached the handle. "You'll regret this," she said, but her voice cracked this time, betraying the vulnerability she was trying so hard to hide behind her threats. I didn't respond to that pathetic attempt at intimidation, just watched her leave. When the door closed behind her, I felt the quiet settle into my chest like fresh air after a violent storm had finally passed. For the first time in what felt like forever, it didn't hurt to breathe. It actually felt genuinely good to be alone with my thoughts, without her presence poisoning the atmosphere around me. I didn't go back to the house after that confrontation, not even once. The clothes I had left behind in our closet, the books scattered around our living room, my tools sitting in the garage, all of it suddenly felt like artifacts from a life that had belonged to someone else entirely. Someone naive and trusting, someone who had believed that shared laughter and intimate moments were stronger than secrets and lies. Jessica didn't message me again after that motel visit. 3 days of complete silence followed, which was unusual for her. There weren't even any passive-aggressive Instagram stories, which had always been her favorite weapon when she wanted me to know she was doing just fine without me. I thought maybe she had finally understood that it was really over this time, that her manipulative tactics weren't going to work anymore. Then came the envelope. It was hand-delivered with no postage, just slid under my motel door like some kind of twisted love note. I opened it expecting more desperate pleas or more gaslighting bullshit designed to make me question my own sanity. Instead, what I found was something cold and businesslike. A typed list with neat bullet points that read like a corporate memo. "You left the mortgage unpaid," it stated matter-of-factly. "Car title is still in both our names," was the next item. "We should agree on what to do about the shared credit cards," followed by, "I've consulted a lawyer." That last line, just 4 words with no emotional fluff, hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't grieving our marriage or processing the loss of what we had built together. She was already planning her exit strategy, already thinking 3 steps ahead about how to extract maximum value from the wreckage. It was calculated, efficient, and completely devoid of any real human emotion. It took me exactly 15 minutes to drive over to my friend Chris's place after reading that legal threat disguised as a business memo. He had a spare room and the kind of blunt, no-nonsense sense of logic that helped me think straight when my emotions were clouding my judgment. When I showed up at his door, he didn't ask a bunch of probing questions or try to psychoanalyze the situation. He just handed me a key, grabbed a beer from his fridge, and said simply, "She's poison. You're lucky it only took you 5 years to realize it." I started making lists of my own that night, nothing fancy or legal, just a regular notebook with scribbled lines that helped me organize my thoughts. "Call lawyer," I wrote first. "Cancel joint cards" came next, followed by "get new bank account." The last item on my list was "figure out who I am without her," and that one took the longest to work through. At night, I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text Jessica about something completely mundane. A funny meme, a song that reminded me of some shared memory, just the kind of random stuff couples share throughout the day. Then I'd remember the image of her hand resting casually on Brandon's thigh, and the way she didn't even flinch when I walked in on them sitting there together, like they owned the place. One evening, I decided to go sit at the dog park, not because Jessica and I had ever owned a dog together. She always said she was too busy for pet hair and the responsibility that came with taking care of another living creature, but because it used to be our Sunday routine. We'd sit on the bench together, watch the dogs play and chase each other around, and talk about nothing particularly important. Now I sat there alone with just a pen and some paper, writing down all the things I thought I was going to miss about her. It surprised me how few of those things were actually about Jessica herself. What I really missed was the idea of Jessica, the comfortable illusion, the sense of security that came from thinking someone was truly on my team and had my back no matter what. But the real woman, the one who weaponized silence when she was angry, who smiled easily through lies, who could sit there calmly while her marriage exploded around her, I didn't miss her at all. That same night, I got an unexpected message from Brittany, Jessica's sister. "Hey, just wanted to say I'm sorry about everything," it read. I didn't know any of it was happening, If you ever need to talk, I'm here. I stared at that message for a long while, thinking about what Jessica must be telling people now, how she would spin this story to make herself look like the victim. Maybe I was the cold and distant husband who had emotionally withdrawn from the marriage. Maybe Brandon was just there to provide her with support and understanding in a way that I wasn't capable of giving her. But Brittany's message meant something important to me. It meant that Jessica hadn't managed to control every narrative, that people were starting to see through her carefully constructed act. And for the first time since this whole nightmare had started, I actually found myself smiling. A real, genuine smile that came from somewhere deep inside me. Not the fake ones I'd been wearing to get through conversations with well-meaning friends and family members. The first time I saw Jessica after that confrontation at the motel wasn't in some lawyer's office or courthouse like you might expect. It was at Whole Foods of all places, while I was just grabbing something quick for dinner. I hadn't slept well, hadn't bothered shaving, and was wearing a hoodie that probably still smelled like Chris's couch where I'd been crashing. I turned the corner near the frozen food aisle and there she was, looking as polished and put together as always. Her lipstick was perfect, her hair styled in that strategic, messy look that she had always managed to nail effortlessly. She had a shopping basket in one hand, and standing beside her was a man I didn't recognize. Not Brandon. This one was taller, older, better dressed than Brandon had ever been. His hand rested casually on the small of her back, like he belonged there, like he had been in that position for longer than just a few weeks. Jessica saw me and froze for just a split second. I could literally see the calculation firing behind her eyes. Not shame, not regret, but pure awareness that she had been caught in yet another situation. It was like watching someone realize they were reading from a script they hadn't written themselves. I nodded at her politely and kept walking, not breaking stride or showing any reaction. She didn't call out to me, didn't try to follow me or explain who this new guy was. She just watched me pass by with this unreadable half-smile on her face, like she was trying to decide whether I was jealous or pathetic. The truth was, I wasn't either of those things. The moment passed over me like a stone dropped into still water. There was a ripple, but then everything went back to normal. It didn't even register as pain anymore, just a brief acknowledgement that this person I used to know was continuing to live her life exactly as I had expected she would. Later that night, I found myself sitting on Chris's porch with a bottle of something too strong for my empty stomach, going through photos on my phone. I hadn't done this intentionally. It was just muscle memory, the kind of mindless scrolling you do when you're trying to avoid thinking about something specific. I had been avoiding these photos for weeks, but now here they were, filling my screen with memories I thought I had buried. There was Jessica laughing with a scoop of ice cream melting down her hand during one of our beach trips. Another showed her in our backyard, barefoot in the summer heat, holding a sparkler like an excited kid on the 4th of July. There was one of her sleeping peacefully in the passenger seat during a long road trip, and in every single photo, there I was beside her, always smiling, always looking completely content and in love. But now, looking at these images with clear eyes, I could see something I had missed before. Behind every single captured moment, behind every framed memory that had seemed so genuine and real, there was a lie I hadn't caught yet. Each photo represented a moment where I had believed completely in what we were building together, while she had already been planning her exit strategy, already looking for something else, someone else. I deleted them all that night, not in anger, not as some act of revenge, but as a release, like finally letting go of a breath I had been holding for far too long. It felt like setting down a heavy weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. 2 days later, Jessica sent me another text message. "We need to talk. Can we meet?" It read. There was no punctuation this time, no emoji, no attempt at casual manipulation. That alone told me she wasn't playing for show anymore. This was something different, something more serious. I waited a full day before responding, just to make it clear that I wasn't going to jump whenever she decided she needed something from me. "Why?" I finally replied. Her response came back instantly, which told me she had been waiting by her phone for my answer. "Because I was wrong, and because you were right about all of it," she wrote back. It could have been a trap. Knowing Jessica, it probably was some kind of manipulation designed to draw me back into her web of lies and half-truths. But there was some part of me, not the part that wanted her back or thought we could somehow fix this mess, but the part that needed real closure, that said I should go and hear whatever she had to say. Maybe she would lie to my face one more time, but at least then I could bury this whole chapter of my life for good and move forward completely. We agreed to meet at a coffee place downtown, the same one where she used to drag me every Saturday morning because their almond croissants were supposedly the only real ones in town, according to her very particular standards. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a back table with her sunglasses resting on the surface and her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like it could somehow warm whatever was left of her conscience. When she saw me walk in, she actually looked nervous for once. Good. She fucking should be nervous after everything she had put me through. She didn't start with hello or any small talk. Instead, she jumped straight into it with, "I ruined everything." I nodded slowly, not giving her any emotional reaction to work with. "Yeah, you did," I replied matter-of-factly. And then she said something I genuinely didn't expect to hear. She said his name, Brandon, and what she told me next completely changed my understanding of what had actually been happening behind the scenes of our marriage. She said his name like it physically burned her mouth to speak it out loud. "Brandon wasn't just a mistake," Jessica began, her voice low like she was genuinely ashamed or at least pretending to be. "It wasn't just one night or some stupid moment of weakness. It started months ago." I didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched her talk and waited to see where this confession was heading. "We ran into each other at some networking event," she continued, building her story piece by piece. "He was charming. He remembered specific things about me that you didn't seem to notice anymore." She looked up to see if that particular jab had landed and hurt me the way she intended. It didn't. I just waited patiently for her to continue. Jessica swallowed hard before going on. It felt easy, familiar, like I could breathe without constantly feeling like I was failing at something. I raised an eyebrow at that loaded statement. "Failing at what exactly?" I asked her directly. "Loyalty? Basic human decency?" She didn't answer that question, just looked down at her coffee cup like it might come to her defense and provide some kind of justification for her choices. Then she said the part that made this whole twisted situation tilt sideways in a way I never saw coming. "He's gone," she said quietly. I blinked at her, not quite processing what she had just said. "Gone?" I repeated, needing clarification. Jessica nodded, and a shaky smile started twitching at the corners of her lips. Not a happy smile, but the kind that appears when someone is trying to hold back tears or maintain composure while their world crumbles around them. "Turns out Brandon has a wife," she explained, her voice getting smaller with each word. "A real one, not someone he's separated from, not some it's complicated situation that he could explain away. A legitimate wife with 2 kids. She paused, letting that information sink in before delivering the final blow to her own fantasy. "He blocked me on everything, deleted all traces of our conversations, ghosted me like I never existed in his life." For the first time since this whole nightmare began, her voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard before. It wasn't the defensive, manipulative tone she had been using, and it wasn't the performative emotion she had tried to weaponize during our previous conversations. This was just broken, raw, and completely genuine. And for one sick, twisted second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She shook her head, biting down on her lip like she could physically stop the trembling that was threatening to give away just how devastated she really was. "I thought he was different," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "And I thought you were," replied, and that response stung her more than I had expected it would. "I didn't come here to ask for anything," she said quickly, probably seeing something in my expression that made her realize I wasn't going to offer her comfort or sympathy. I needed you to know that it wasn't just about you, about problems in our marriage, or things you weren't giving me. I was lost, and he offered distraction, and then he disappeared the moment things got complicated for him." I took a sip of my coffee and let the silence stretch between us, long and cold and uncomfortable. Jessica looked up at me again, searching my face for some kind of reaction or emotion she could work with. "I'm sorry," she said finally, and maybe she actually was sorry this time. But she wasn't sorry for cheating on me, wasn't sorry for betraying my trust in the worst possible way, wasn't sorry for destroying our marriage in our own home. She was sorry that Brandon had dumped her, sorry that her little fantasy had collapsed before she could rewrite the ending to make herself look like the hero of her own story. She was sorry that she was alone now and facing the consequences of her choices. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice completely neutral. "I appreciate the honesty." She looked relieved for just a moment, like that acknowledgement meant something significant, like I was about to say we should try again, that we could rebuild from this foundation of truth. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. I stood up from the table and pushed my chair back in, preparing to leave this conversation and this chapter of my life behind me permanently. She sat there with her half-empty coffee cup and her full serving of well-deserved consequences, watching me walk away from her for the second time. Outside, the air felt lighter somehow, cleaner, like I had just walked out of a room full of toxic fumes. I didn't look back at her through the coffee shop window, but the next day she did something that caught me completely off guard once again. She showed up at my workplace in the middle of the afternoon while I was reviewing project timelines with my team. Someone from the reception desk buzzed up to my office with a message that made my stomach drop. "There's a woman here asking for you," the receptionist said through the intercom. "She says it's urgent." I already knew exactly who it was before I even asked. Jessica hadn't shown up at my workplace once during our entire 5 years of marriage. Not for birthdays, not when I got promoted, not for any company events or celebrations. But now she was here with some kind of emergency that couldn't wait. I came downstairs expecting to find her having some kind of emotional breakdown or public scene that would embarrass me in front of my colleagues. Instead, I found her standing calmly in the lobby, looking completely poised with her makeup perfectly applied and her hair styled like she was on her way to close some important business deal. She was dressed professionally, put together, confident. The only difference was that she wasn't selling a product this time. She was selling herself, trying to package herself as someone worth taking back. "I'm not here to beg," she said, before I could even speak or ask her what the hell she was doing at my office. "Just give me 5 minutes of your time." I didn't say yes to her request, but I didn't say no either. I just walked past her toward the side parking lot behind the building, away from the windows where my coworkers might be watching this drama unfold. She followed me like I knew she would, like I was leading her exactly where she wanted to go. Once we were outside and away from prying eyes, she handed me a manila envelope that felt heavier than it should have. "What's this?" I asked, though part of me already dreaded finding out. "It's everything," she replied cryptically. I opened it slowly, not sure if I really wanted to see what was inside. The envelope contained papers, bank statements, screenshots of text messages, printed emails, and entire conversation threads between her and Brandon. It was proof, actual receipts of their deception laid out in chronological order. She had documented every message he had sent her, every deleted plan they had made, every lie they had told, even screenshots of hotel bookings and restaurant reservations. It was like she had been building a case file of her own betrayal. One particular message stood out among all the others, something Brandon had sent about a week before I caught them together in our guest room. "He'll never leave you," it read. "You said he was too passive, too comfortable to actually do anything about it." I looked up from the papers to find Jessica watching me intently, like a child bracing for punishment or hoping for forgiveness. "I kept all of it," she said, her voice smaller now than it had been in the lobby. "I thought maybe someday I would need it." She paused, then added quickly, "Not to hurt you or use it against you, but to explain everything, to finally be completely honest about what happened." I almost laughed at that statement. "Honest?" I repeated, looking at her with disbelief. "Yeah, you kept all the receipts for me," I said sarcastically. "But you didn't keep them to be honest. You kept them in case Brandon decided to ruin you, which he eventually did." She didn't argue with my assessment, just looked tired in a way I had never seen before. Not the glamorous, polished Jessica I had been married to. Not the smug version who had leaned confidently into Brandon's shoulder while I walked away from my own house. Just exhausted, deflated, and completely defeated. "Why are you doing this?" I asked her directly, genuinely curious about what she hoped to accomplish with this folder full of evidence. She took a deep breath before answering, like she was gathering courage to say something she had been rehearsing. "Because I don't want you to hate me," she said quietly. It was honest. Maybe the first genuinely honest thing she had said to me in months. But it was also completely pathetic. "I don't hate you," I told her, my voice flat and emotionless. "You're not worth that much energy or emotion." She winced at my words, but didn't argue or try to defend herself, which was probably the smartest thing she had done in this entire conversation. That response marked the difference between who she used to be and who she was now. The old Jessica would have fought back, would have tried to turn my words around and make me the villain. This version just took the hit and absorbed it. "I trusted you," I said, letting each word carry the weight it deserved. "That used to mean something important." She stepped closer to me then, like physical proximity could somehow fix what she had broken beyond any possibility of repair. "Can we just start over?" she asked desperately. We can figure this out together, work through it step by step. No, I said simply, and she flinched like I had physically struck her. You expected me to crawl, I continued, my voice steady and sure of every word. To fight, to beg for scraps of your attention and affection. I'm not doing any of that. I gave you everything I had to give, and you threw it all away for nothing meaningful. That's when she finally started crying. Real tears this time, not the calculated emotional manipulation she had tried before. But it was too late for tears to matter. Her crying was nothing more than receipts for a transaction that had already been completed. Proof of a sale that couldn't be reversed or undone. I turned around and walked back into the building without saying another word to her. She didn't follow me this time, didn't try to chase after me, or make one last desperate plea. But about a week later, her name came up again in my life, not through a text message or phone call, but in a legal envelope from her lawyer that completely changed the entire dynamic of our separation. The envelope was much heavier than it should have been, thick with official documents and cold legal language. My name was typed in bold letters on the front, addressed to the new apartment I had just moved into. There was no personal note from Jessica, no warning about what was coming, just the brutal consequences of everything that had happened laid out in legal terms. I opened it slowly, like it might literally bite me if I wasn't careful. Inside was a petition that made my blood run cold. Jessica was filing for separation of assets, and she was being incredibly aggressive about it. She wanted the house we had bought together. She wanted half of all my savings, money I had been accumulating since before we even met. She even had the nerve to list the car I had purchased before we got married under community property that should be divided between us. There was a spreadsheet attached to the legal documents, and it was color-coded like some kind of business presentation. She had systematically labeled things that were clearly mine. My personal tools, my home office equipment, even the damn espresso machine I had saved up for months to buy, as shared property that she was entitled to claim. It was like she hadn't just burned our entire relationship down with her affair with Brandon, but now she felt somehow entitled to walk away with souvenirs from the wreckage. My lawyer called Jessica's legal strategy a classic power play when I brought the documents to her office the next day. It's about control, she explained to me with the kind of professional detachment that comes from seeing this scenario play out dozens of times before. She lost you as a person, so now she wants to keep whatever's left of your shared life that she can get her hands on. It felt like a second betrayal somehow, and in many ways it was worse than the first one. She didn't just want out of our marriage. She wanted to walk away with trophies from the destruction she had caused. I didn't respond to Jessica directly about the legal documents. I let my lawyer handle all the communication and let that professional coldness act as a shield between us. But inside, I was absolutely boiling with rage. Not because she wanted money from me, and not even because she was being petty and vindictive about the whole process. I was furious because she had the sheer audacity to still play the victim in this situation, to act like she deserved compensation for the marriage she had destroyed with her own choices. Then came the real twist in this already complicated story. Brittany, Jessica's sister, sent me another text message that changed everything I thought I knew about my wife. You need to know something important, the message read. It's not just you she's done this to. I called Brittany immediately, and what she told me during that conversation peeled back a layer of Jessica's history that I didn't even know existed. Apparently, Jessica had done this exact same thing before. Before me. Before our marriage. Before I thought I was the center of her universe. Back when she was dating some guy named Colin, an ex-boyfriend I had heard her mention once or twice over the years, but never really thought much about. The story Jessica had always told me was the standard breakup narrative. He was emotionally cold. He didn't appreciate me. He took me for granted. But Brittany revealed the real truth behind that relationship's demise. Jessica had cheated on Colin too, carrying on an affair with a coworker while pretending everything was fine at home. She manipulated the situation, played both men against each other, and executed the same exact playbook she had used with me and Brandon. Colin found out about the cheating and tried to walk away with whatever dignity he had left, just like I had done. And Jessica, just like she was doing now with me, had tried to financially gut him during their separation. It wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake born from loneliness. It was a deliberate pattern of behavior, a fucking lifestyle choice that she had turned into an art form. I hung up the phone after that conversation and stared at my ceiling for a long time, letting this new information settle into my brain and reshape everything I thought I understood about my marriage. My heartbeat gradually slowed down. My hands stopped shaking. and a strange sense of calm washed over me. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was clarity, pure and simple. Jessica wasn't a broken woman who had made some terrible choices under pressure. She was built this way, programmed for this kind of destruction, and I had just been her latest victim in a long line of men who thought they were special. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The fog of confusion and self-doubt that had been clouding my judgment for weeks finally lifted, and I could see the path forward with perfect clarity. That clarity changed absolutely everything about how I approached this situation. I stopped feeling like a victim who had been blindsided by circumstances beyond my control. Instead, I started thinking like a survivor who had valuable information and knew exactly how to use it. Jessica's betrayal wasn't some personal attack designed specifically to hurt me. It was simply her following a playbook she had perfected over years of practice. It was a cycle she had danced through before with Colin, and she would no doubt perform again with whatever poor guy came next who thought he was different or special. But I wasn't going to be another Colin. I wasn't going to fold under pressure or let her walk all over me just because she had experience manipulating men who cared about her. My lawyer and I completely restructured our legal response with surgical precision. No more being reasonable for the sake of keeping the peace. No more bending over backwards to accommodate Jessica's demands just because I felt guilty about the marriage ending. Jessica wanted to fight dirty? I would meet her in that ring with facts, documented timelines, and her own receipts as ammunition against her. I sent in my counterpetition with the kind of detail that left no room for interpretation or manipulation. I included comprehensive bank records showing all of my premarital assets, proving beyond any doubt that my savings and investments were mine long before Jessica entered the picture. I provided documentation that the car had been purchased 2 full years before we got married, making it completely separate property. I submitted screenshots of Jessica's text messages to Brandon with timestamps that aligned perfectly with specific nights when she had lied directly to my face about where she was and who she was with. And then came the final piece of evidence that I knew would completely destroy her case. A sworn statement from Brittany herself. Yes, Jessica's own sister had finally had enough of the lies, the manipulation, and the years of watching Jessica systematically destroy everyone who was foolish enough to trust her completely. Brittany didn't just back up my version of events. She actually offered to testify in court if necessary, to tell the truth about Jessica's pattern of behavior that stretched back years before I had ever met her. When Jessica received my revised legal petition, she didn't reply directly to me, which was probably the smartest move she could have made at that point. But 2 days later, my lawyer forwarded me an email that had come from Jessica's attorney. The tone had changed completely from aggressive demands to something much more conciliatory. Jessica was now open to fair and amicable division of assets, which was legal speak for she's retreating as fast as possible. The woman who had sat back confidently on my couch with Brandon's hand resting possessively between her thighs, who had smirked with cold calculation as I walked out of the house we had built together, was now folding quietly like a con artist who had been caught in the middle of running her favorite scam. I should have felt like this was some kind of victory, some moment of triumph where justice had finally been served. Instead, it just felt like peace. Quiet, slow, sustainable peace that settled into my bones like relief after a long illness had finally broken. I started sleeping again for the first time in weeks. Not the shallow, haunted naps I had been surviving on since this whole nightmare began, but real, deep sleep that felt restorative instead of like a battle I was fighting every night. I got a gym membership and threw myself into establishing new routines that had nothing to do with the life Jessica and I had shared together. I deleted every last trace of her from my phone. Photos, contact information, shared playlists, everything. I changed all my passwords, created new habits, and began the process of rebuilding my identity as a single person. One evening, I decided to go out to a bar with Chris and some of his friends. It wasn't some grand gesture or attempt to immediately start dating again. I just wanted to drink a little, listen to some music, and enjoy the buzz of being around strangers who didn't know anything about what I had been through. People who wouldn't look at me with pity or ask how I was holding up after my marriage imploded. That's when I saw her. Not Jessica, but someone completely different. She had dark, curly hair and was sitting alone at the bar, reading something on her phone and occasionally laughing to herself about whatever she was seeing. She looked up from her screen and caught me staring at her. Instead of smiling politely and looking away like most people would, she just held my gaze without any pretense or game playing. For a moment, The part of me that I thought was completely done with romance, the part that believed I would never trust or want anyone again, cracked open just a little bit. Jessica may have broken the life I had built and destroyed the future I thought we were working toward together, but she hadn't broken me as a person. Not even close. The final court hearing took exactly 11 minutes from start to finish. 11 fucking minutes to legally dissolve 5 years of marriage, reducing everything we had built together to legal jargon and a few quiet nods from the judge who had probably seen this exact scenario play out hundreds of times before. Jessica showed up looking exactly like she always did in moments like this. Polished, unbothered, perfectly put together, as if showing any real emotion would somehow ruin the foundation she was wearing. I barely looked at her during the proceedings, and I didn't need to. She knew what I knew now, that the mask had slipped completely and there was no putting it back on. The court accepted our settlement agreement without any drama or extended discussion. It was the one where she walked away with significantly less than she had originally demanded, and exactly what she actually deserved based on the law and the evidence. I kept my car, kept my savings account intact, and kept my name off the house that she had already begun listing for sale while we were still technically married. She had turned our entire relationship into a cold business transaction, so I treated it exactly like one. No emotion, no sentimentality, just facts and legal requirements. As we exited the courthouse building, she walked beside me in complete silence for a few seconds before finally speaking. "I guess this is it," she said, like she was commenting on the weather or the end of a casual business meeting. I nodded once, not bothering to elaborate or give her any additional emotional response to work with. She tilted her head slightly, like she was searching for something specific in my facial expression. Anger, regret, lingering affection, anything she could use to anchor herself in my memory or make herself feel important. But I gave her absolutely nothing. "Take care, Dylan," she said finally, then turned and walked away toward her car. It was the same vehicle she used to drive during all those late-night runs to supposedly help Brittany with her endless drama and emergencies. She didn't look back at me, not once, which was probably for the best. Good riddance. I stood there for a moment longer, just listening to the sounds around me. Cars passing by, a gentle breeze moving through the trees, and most importantly, the complete silence inside my own head that no longer felt like crushing emptiness. It had transformed into something else entirely. Space. Clean, open space that was ready for something much better than what I had just left behind. Over the next few weeks, I focused on building again. Not a new relationship or some grand romantic gesture, but simply a sustainable rhythm for my daily life. I established a routine of morning jogs, started eating cleaner meals that I actually enjoyed preparing, and began reading books that had nothing to do with self-help or relationship recovery. I made plans to go out with friends more regularly, and I let genuine laughter back into my life for the first time in months. Sometimes, during quiet moments when I was alone with my thoughts, I would think about the version of myself that might have stayed with Jessica, who might have begged and crawled and compromised his dignity just to keep a broken marriage limping along. And I felt genuinely proud of the version of myself who had chosen differently. One Saturday evening, I found myself back at that same bar where I had first started to feel human again. The curly-haired woman was there again, sitting in almost the exact same spot as before. This time, she was the one who smiled first, and I found myself smiling back naturally. There were no grand promises hanging in the air between us, no elaborate fantasies about what might develop between us. Just two people who happened to be strangers, both alive at the same time, maybe standing on the edge of something real and honest. I don't know what comes next in my life, and for the first time in years, that uncertainty doesn't scare me. But I know this much for certain. I gave my absolute best to someone who never deserved it, and that fact will never be my shame to carry. That will always be her loss, not mine. To anyone out there who might be reading this and going through the same kind of slow burn betrayal that I experienced, I want you to understand something important. Don't wait around hoping for them to change into someone better. Don't beg someone to treat you like a human being worthy of basic respect and loyalty. Walk away with your dignity intact, even if your heart feels like it's being dragged behind you every step of the way. They expected you to crawl, to compromise yourself, to accept less than you deserve. But you don't have to do any of that. You never had to. Some people in this world are simply built to destroy what others work hard to build. Jessica was one of those people, and recognizing that truth doesn't make me bitter or cynical about love in general. Instead, it makes me free. Free to find someone who actually deserves the kind of love and loyalty I have to give. Because here's what I learned the hard way through all of this. Loyalty isn't weakness, and trust isn't stupidity. Walking away from someone who treats your heart like a rental car they can damage without consequences isn't giving up on love. It's growing up and learning to value yourself properly. 6 months later, I'm living in a completely different place, both literally and figuratively. I moved into a new apartment, established new daily routines, and surrounded myself with new people who don't know the story of Jessica and Brandon and all the drama that came with it. And that's exactly how I want it to be. I don't want to be defined by what happened to me, or seen as the guy whose wife cheated on him. I'm just Dylan now, starting fresh with a clean slate. Sometimes I find myself wondering what Jessica is doing these days, whether she found another Colin or another Dylan to run her manipulative games on. Someone new and unsuspecting who thinks he's special, who believes her stories about past relationships and doesn't see the warning signs that are probably there if he knows how to look for them. But I don't wonder about it for very long because it's simply not my problem anymore. It never really was my problem to begin with. I just didn't understand that at the time. The curly-haired woman from the bar, her name is Elena, and she's absolutely nothing like Jessica in any way that matters. She's refreshingly direct and honest in her communication. She says exactly what she means and means exactly what she says, without any hidden agendas or emotional manipulation tactics. We're taking things slowly, getting to know each other without rushing into anything serious. But there's something genuinely real developing between us. Something that doesn't require constant translation or second-guessing every conversation we have. When I told Elena about Jessica and what had happened in my marriage, she didn't try to fix me or analyze my emotional state. She didn't offer pity or treat me like I was damaged goods who needed special handling. She just nodded thoughtfully and said, "Sounds like you dodged a bullet there." And somehow, that simple, honest response felt like the most authentic thing anyone had said to me in years. No drama, no overcomplication, just acknowledgement and acceptance. The whole experience taught me that some relationships are meant to end, not because you didn't try hard enough or love deeply enough, but because some people are fundamentally incompatible with the kind of honest, loyal partnership you're looking for. Jessica needed chaos and drama and the thrill of deception to feel alive. I needed trust and stability and someone who would choose me consistently, even when it wasn't easy or exciting. We were never going to work long-term, no matter how much effort I put into trying to make it successful. The only regret I have now is that it took me 5 years to see her clearly for who she really was, instead of who I wanted her to be. Update. Thanks for reading my story. If you're going through something similar, feel free to reach out in the comments. Sometimes it helps to know you're not alone in dealing with this kind of betrayal. And remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary.